Would you say that this is beat poetry?
Spoken word poetry, I guess. I mean, it's related to beat in the way that it's written to be performed. Mm-hmm. It's written for the stage, and then it's wordplay and sort of quotes and there's not really a literary ambition. So I don't know if it's poetry at all. I mean, it's kind of like playing with the format of poetry and spoken word poetry. I mean, if you want to be a beat poet, you would have to be born in the, or you have to be working in the 50s. No,
I know.
Yeah.
But no, but
there's also Dada. I mean, there's also Situationists. There's all kinds of things that I'm sort of researching and exploring through the things that I write.
Situationists wrote poetry?
They wrote stuff, yeah. I mean, more like slogans.
Okay.
and things to think about. I mean, this is also poetry should be something that somehow imitates thoughts. I mean, the pattern of thoughts, of remembering and forgetting and thinking and non-thinking and drifting, and this is sort of what I'm interested in, trying to capture that rhythm in what I'm writing.
What do you think happens when you take a text and make it into a spoken word?
I always thought of it as a kind of drag performance. that the rhythm is the law and the father, and the spoken is the emotion and the mother, if that makes any sense. I mean, so it's a kind of transformation, and it doesn't matter if the writer is a man or a woman or the performer. It's more like the quality of the words alter, and this is also what's interesting to me with language, is that you have these levels of these possibilities where you sort of need to write a certain way if you're a writer, and people will correct your writing. It's supposed to be a certain way, and if you speak, you can sort of improvise and go other places, and so there's those two qualities and the kind of swaps between them that I find interesting.
And the beats were, a lot of the performances were like with a double bass, or
yeah.
Would you have wanted to do that?
There's been some attempts at including music, but depends on. I'm always open to collaborate, and but a lot of times it would also be more disturbing, actually, because it's kind of a thing in itself with the things that I'm quoting, and so if the music comes on top, then you kind of, it gets disturbing for me, and I think it gets even disturbing for people trying to follow the thing. It becomes something else, and it's good if it's entertaining or fun, but it's also not entertainment. So that's also somehow why it becomes difficult when you. I mean, not that all music is entertainment, but people tend to sort of relax and enjoy the music rather than stay focused if you have too much of that thing going on.
I guess the idea why they were including it is, first of all, they were all inspired by jazz, I suppose, and by the
and that was also new then. I mean, they were exploring something and exploring. Yeah, so that's different.
But also, probably they wanted to. It was a particular interpretation of the stream of consciousness, like it's something that has a beat.
Yeah.
That's why the word beat, I suppose.
Yeah.
So when you kind of read it with some kind of a rhythm, it reinforces the unity of the stream of consciousness involved.
Yeah. I'm interested in noise music. I mean, there's someone in New York, Stefan Scherpnin. We've been working, so it's no longer beats. It's more like noise and sounds in relation to it. This could be interesting. We haven't really. I mean, we made some things and we made some concerts, and that's always good. But we haven't really put any recordings out. But we're still working actually. Yeah. So that's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't go for jazz these days unless it's kind of like ironic or something. But I mean, in the 50s, jazz was super exciting. It still is. It's just not something I'm sort of identifying my work with.
I saw a kind of an elderly woman doing beat poetry actually here in Vienna. And
with jazz.
Yeah, with like a double bass and drums. And that was actually the first time that I actually saw something like that. I never understood how it would actually work. And you have to, I suppose you have to be forceful with the voice and to kind of deliver. But it kind of made sense to me somehow.
Alright, I think about it.
I'm not suggesting.
You're kind of forcing me here.
No, what really struck me is this idea of the unity of the stream of consciousness. You know, that kind of rang a bell.
And improvisation, I guess. I mean, there's also this aspect in relation to jazz that was also something that was explored at that time, and which was also sort of anathema to the kind of modernist idea of poetry as something very composed and very static and certainly not improvised at all.
Yeah, it was interesting that the people that like the post-punk New York bands, like were influenced by were people like Rimbaud and Baudelaire, who were pretty formal poets. Don't you think it's kind of interesting?
Yeah, but I mean, they also had a lot of attitude, and maybe that's why where they would pick up the inspiration. I mean, like and inventors. There's a kind of there's a very creative moment with punk and some years after. It's a little bit where I start. I'm very there's photocopies and this kind of. I mean that's coming from there. And I was making sort of when I was a teenager. I was making posters and flyers for punk concerts, and I wasn't really playing. I was kind of too shy and too awkward to be on stage or to collaborate with other people, but they would often ask me to illustrate and make that kind of, and that's something. I mean, this is for this evening, and it's something I'm still very interested in, and there's also somehow some kind of photo copy world out there going on. They always seem to be 24 hours. Like in New York, I would go at night and make copies I would make books, and I would often go like at 2 in the morning or something, and there's always these people who are sort of with clippings from the newspaper and they lost their cat, or I mean there's all this kind of, but there's really a lot of kind of freaks between, like the freaks that go to poetry readings and the freaks that make photocopies. I mean there's quite a few people you can reach actually that have this very specialized interest, and I'm never happier than when I can make some photocopies on a photocopy machine. I don't know why, but there's something super satisfying about that. So that's still there.
Which punk bands were they?
It was kind of this is when I was living in Sweden with my parents, so it was kind of local bands. I mean, there was something called Porno Pop that I really liked, and they were always in sort of 60s suits, very stylish suits, and then they had like women's heels. And I guess it was like a New York Doll thing they were trying to do. They were called Porno Pop, and then I don't remember. I mean, it was kind of like local. I mean, it was really this kind of do-it-yourself thing.
It was. Which town was it? Was it Stockholm?
It's outside of Stockholm. It's called Västerås, which is where I'm from. And yeah.
So the bands were local, really from this small town?
No, they would be from Stockholm.
I see.
And some local ones. And yeah, there was this one. Yeah, I mean, it was all this kind of chaos and anarchy, this kind of names. Yeah.
Was a stage diving?
This is, I guess, 35 years ago, so I can't really remember all the details, but there was a lot of pogoing. I mean, that's what we were doing, and sort of, I'm not even sure it was a stage. I mean, it was, I don't know if it was a stage diving. There was all kinds of physical contact anyway, in this small stretch. I mean, you know what it looks like.
Yeah, of course.
all the energy and outfits and things.
And so you said before that you were not sure it's poetry, but it's like near poetry.
Almost poetry.
Almost poetry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought that was an interesting expression.
Yeah. I mean, that's what beat poets will get also. I mean, that it's not really real poetry because it's kind of, there is this sort of performative element, but yeah. Sometimes, if I want to explain it, I kind of say that I'm kind of using poetry. I'm an artist using poetry the same way someone like Rikrit Ravania would use cooking. I mean, there's never anyone telling Rikrit that he's a cook. I mean, and he isn't. I mean, he's good at making food, but he's not. I mean, he's an artist, and that's somehow what I'm trying to be also. I mean, I'm interested in the kind of writing process, and I also make the books. I'm also interested in artists' books and sort of written formats. And there was a lot of I was kind of interested in, which is funny because she's now on the wall downstairs. Barbara Kruger and Jenny Holzer, and I was sort of never so interested in. This is also where I kind of connect with someone like Josef Straub. I was never so interested in this huge statement and the idea of empowering yourself through language like you had through Barbara Kruger and Holzer. I mean, they are women trying to get across some kind of message by sort of using this kind of a language of advertising and of sort of big headline type language, and I wanted to do the opposite of bringing language back to something emotional and improvised and unstable and in small print and in a more kind of intimate scale. But it's still sort of language-based art practice, if you will. I mean, that's how I sort of came to it. I know it's not literature and it's not music, so what else could it be? It has to be art, I guess.
I guess the point is, if I may, is that what you were saying before is about remembering, forgetting. You take the basic cognitive operations that you go through and you speed them up, tweak them a little bit, and so that at the end it's about a kind of a state of consciousness where the cognitive operations are not fully functional, but by tweaking it and perturbing them, you get kind of a sense of the limits of the mind or something like that? How would that
I'm also very interested in how things stay in memory. I mean, this is also, and also the way I read things, I read them almost like a kind of stream of consciousness or an inner voice, the way you would hear a voice inside your head rather than on a stage. And it's also quite repetitive and rhythmic what I do, so it's also meant to actually stay in your head once you it, with some people, as far as I'm aware, it also works that they sort of hear my voice in their heads after having heard it somewhere and see where that and a lot of the things I'm writing are also sort of things that I sort of remember or somehow sense while I'm trying to work, and it's this kind of collage type work where I kind of put things together and try to make a different meaning or a new experience somehow through the way these different parts are combined in what I write.
I guess Wittgenstein, I think, said that poetry is language on a holiday. You like that?
That's surprising from him, actually, but yeah, that's all right. I mean, all of that.
And what about writing under the influence? Would that interest you? Or reading?
Yeah, reading is maybe a bit easier. Writing is a kind of substance abuse in itself. I mean, it's not really helping, as far as I'm aware, in the sense that it would liberate you or help you get ideas. I mean, there's plenty of ideas. I mean, it's more work of trying to make them work somehow, and drugs more like fuck things up, I think, at least for me, yeah.
And do you try to put yourself in a trance?
No.
That could work.
Yeah. I mean, there is some kind of trance happening, but it's not like I'm trying. And I never tried hypnosis. any other. I mean, it's a very kind of librarian type activity. It's a very sort of everyday. I would think more of it as a kind of journal writing, or I'm also interested in this idea of. I mean, it started with me actually going to readings of poetry in New York when I was living there, and I was very interested in, and they would be always with the kind of open mic elements, so there would always be someone invited to read, and then you could sign on, and anyone in the audience could read, and often there were no more than 50 people in the audience. Even when Richard Hell was a featured reader, I mean, there would always be very small crowds. So in the end, there was actually no reader, and no audience and no reader either. But everyone is performing, and so that's also a kind of punk thing, and this was kind of interesting to me. And there's also a kind of because of this kind of exchange that you get, people will sort of pay attention to each other, because then you know that you're going to be in the position in a few minutes, and so there's also a kind of leveling of good and bad. Like everything is kind of somehow interesting, and this is also something I feel that you can always sort of cover up bad writing with good performance or vice versa. I mean, there's always ways of somehow making it work, and this is something I'm curious about, and also this activity of people writing for their drawers or for their diary, which is hidden, and there's all this writing activities going on where people don't actually share it, and I find that very interesting, and trying to find that level of intimacy, but then actually sharing it through somehow some kind of.
Josef Strauss has a text that I liked a lot, where he described how he wanted to change something small in his memories, to kind of brainwash himself into taking a memory and just changing it a little bit. He said that he didn't think he could do it with a big change, but he was kind of trying to brainwash himself into making adding something little to his memories or changing something small. And I thought that if you can really do it, it opened a kind of a new vista of what poetry can do, and also an interpretation of what poetry maybe does. I thought it was a kind of an interesting idea. If poetry can really brainwash you to make like little changes in the head, then it means that it really gets somehow into the, I don't know, hardware, software, something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's in linguistics. I mean that's also. I mean they also study people with speech defects. Yeah, and this is. I mean that's another thing compared to drugs. Then I mean I don't think it would help you. You would probably be kind of inhibited by it. But actually it's a very useful thing for reinventing language and also for finding surprising things in language if you kind of say things the way you think they're meant to be said, that you're actually saying them wrong, and yeah, there's something quite productive in all that,
Do you feel close to any of the rappers?
I like Missy Elliott a lot. She's not really a rapper, but she's very good with words, and she has great energy. I'm more a kind of R&B. I mean this or I mean I mix. I mean I like any music which is inventive and going places where I wasn't expecting myself to go. Yeah.
But you don't feel particularly close to the idea of rapping as a production of text with. I think that at least some of the rappers felt very close to the beat.
Yeah, it's just a very. I mean, I'm quite a shy guy, and I could never do the bragging and all that. I mean, it's especially not when I was starting, when I was incredibly inhibited, so it's an expression with. I mean, I could go for some of the wordplay and some of this, and I've used some of their invention. I mean, hip hop, not in my nature. I mean, this stuff, but the delivery or where I'm when I'm reading is very far. I would say, but who knows? I mean, one day.
Maybe one day you'll rap on stage.
Yeah, I'm not sure how productive it is. I mean, I'm doing. Yeah, maybe one day.
Bragging. I guess many poets brag. It's not just rap, don't you think?
Yeah.
If they don't self-deprecate, they brag.
Yeah. What's wrong with that?
You like, for example, Edgar Allan Poe or Baudelaire? Do you have any relation to this kind of poetry?
I used big parts of The Raven early on, and that's an interesting poem, the way it's sort of describing the impossibility of a work process, and you don't know if this raven is a ghost or a dead person or his own hallucination or some kind of symbol for something that you're kind of reaching for that you can't and it also says nevermore, and this was it's supposed to be the name of the raven, and this was also something which was somehow nice to repeat on stage, because you kind of say
alliterative.
Yeah, you kind of say I'm never going to do this again, and this is what was also interesting with that was that American school children learn it by heart when they're quite young. So you would also read it, and at some point they would start recognizing, and then they would sort of go back to when they were 7, 8 years old, and there would be this kind of time travel element to it. And otherwise, I mean, I read his short stories, and I don't read an enormously amount of poetry, I wouldn't say. I like going to readings, and I like sometimes conferences or these kinds of spoken occasions also in the art world, and I always find it interesting to see how people are going to be able to somehow present themselves on stage and in a spoken format, if it's going to make sense or not. And if you do the academic thing where you kind of hide yourself behind all kinds of codes so that people understand that you're not stupid, or if you do the honest thing where you're actually saying things that are more kind of tied to your private self, and that makes sense on a kind of more human level or something, or if you're just clever, or if you're entertaining. I mean, there's all kinds of ways of interacting with an audience, also for artists and all kinds of people. So that's interesting, and then I will look at things through what I write. So there's poets showing up there. I've been going through Ezra Pound a lot recently, and there's a lot of James Joyce, there's a lot of Gertrude Stein. I mean, there's all these kinds of, kind of, as I was saying, it's not obscure stuff, it's more like the kind of really obvious things that I kind of, plus also Dada, Fluxus, how words have been used in an art context, I also find interesting, and also because of the way it seems so separate in many people's minds, that images are one thing and that's what artists do, and writing is a different thing, which is what writers and thinkers do, and I don't think it's true at all. I mean, I think it's important that we all do a bit of art.
You said yesterday, we spoke about after the talk of Clementine Delis, and you said that you liked the idea. Somebody said that there are too many objects. You kind of felt close to this insight.
Yeah, it's not really an insight, it's more a fact of the way we are living in consumerist, materialist reality. We're accumulating, and this was also something, and I think something that a lot of us are trying to cope with. And also it somehow is connected to some idea of end of art, that everything has been done, and it's anyway wrong to add more stuff to the world, and so this is also somehow how I come to work with language, because you sort of create something without making anything, or you can make something. I mean, you need to somehow collect your work process, but if it can be somehow formulated through text rather than through object. I mean, this is interesting, and especially with what they were discussing yesterday. They were discussing how a collection of objects in relation to something like museums or department stores, or how that can somehow, or anthropological museums, how it can somehow constitute a text, or how it can be a kind of writing in a sense, or how writing can somehow be kind of invisible visual art.
Yeah, I mean, did you like this concept that she introduced, remediation? Like between remedy and remedia.
Yeah.
That you keep the same object, but you provide them a different, different.
I mean, that's maybe more interesting in relation to colonial history and anthropology and these kinds of. That I'm not sure. Healing is what we're doing as artists, but
creating a new type of meaning. I thought maybe poetry has something to do with that.
No, definitely, yeah, but maybe for a slightly different reason, but also maybe not. I don't know. I also like to think that anything that anyone is.
De-automatization. Verfremdung-effect. Like expansion of the poetic language. Think of that sort. I thought that it was all these concepts were kind of cousins of remediation. That have some application to poetry.
Also, what we spoke about the transformation between the written and the spoken.
Exactly.
I mean, I would go more in that direction and how it can somehow affect your thinking or your relation to language and what's allowed in language and where it can take you. I mean, it's
But you know, afterwards I was walking with some people and I was presenting this thing about that now ethnology should not take any more objects, and then somebody would say, well, they shouldn't even go to those countries because there's even enough discourse about the object, not just objects, but even discourse about the object. So, in other words, that person was saying it was not really so much about the opposition between objects and language as much as it is between structured thinking about a particular topic rather than I don't know, just kind of poetry, I suppose, like taking normal discourse and turning it on its head somehow.
Yeah, I mean, like, they shouldn't go there. I mean, this is already a kind of the idea that someone needs to travel the idea that someone needs to travel somewhere and kind of inform the rest of us about what's going on there. I mean, we can all go there, or the people from there could come here. I mean, this is different. This whole idea of discovering something at the other end of the world is kind of maybe. It's outlived. It's not so fresh anymore, and maybe in a similar way, like I can sort of tell you about what I can imagine in terms of poetry, but maybe it's also something that I'm doing, so that you can actually do your version of it. Kind of.
Everybody knows about cars, so when they do it, this is like. Remediation.
Remediation, it's a new thing.
I never heard this term before. I thought I'll try to
remediation for the whole
give it a driving test.